Hi there, I'm Kevin McCormick and welcome to this episode of Lake Orion Sports Update. Today we're bringing you the latest news in Lake Orion sports, including softball, baseball, soccer, and a whole lot more, all coming up right now. On Thursday, April 14th, the girls softball team was home against Utica Eisenhower. The game had to be moved to Lake Orion's JV fields due to the varsity fields being excessively wet. That didn't throw off the Dragons, however, as they would win both games of their doubleheader. In Game 1, senior pitcher Sierra Gonzalez limited Eisenhower to only 6 hits and 1 run. The Dragon bats were hot and scored 7 runs on 12 hits. In the second game, Lake Orion didn't let up. The girls scored 12 runs on 13 hits to Eisenhower's 7 runs on 7 hits. The Dragons held a tournament at their home field on Saturday, April 16th. The day started off with a game against Davison High School. The Dragons were able to snag the victory with a score of 13-3. Junior Lexi Aguilar was the pitcher for Lake Orion and earned her first win of the season. The next game was against Imlay City, in which the Dragons continued their winning streak 13-2. Senior Sierra Gonzalez pitched during this game, and her winning streak was kept intact. Shelby Misiak had 4 RBIs, and Cassidy Carson also had a home run and 4 RBIs. Teammates Bethany Gardner contributed 3 hits, and Elena Basso added 2. The third game matchup would be against Brandon High School. Once again, Lake Orion managed to bag the win with a much closer score of 2-1. Aguilar once again was the pitcher for the Dragons and earned her second win of the season. Freshman Tessa Noose and senior Mackenzie Case were the point earners for the Dragons. The final championship match was up against Lake Orion and their rivals, the Oxford Wildcats. Shelby Misiak set the Dragons on the path to success after scoring a huge 2-run home run. Noose and Schrader scored once for Lake Orion after reaching the base twice. Lake Orion was able to hit 2 more runs during the game and defeated the Wildcats 4-0. On Tuesday the 19th, the girls hosted Rochester Adams in an OAA League matchup. The Dragons' bats were booming from the start. Senior Shelby Misiak was 2 for 2 with a walk and 2 RBIs, and sophomore Bethany Gardner was 2 for 3 with 2 RBIs to lead the Dragons. Senior Sierra Gonzalez pitched for the Dragons, pitching her second shutout of the season, and the Dragons won 12-0 in the first game. ONTV filmed this game in its entirety. You can go to OnTV.org for future playback times, or you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the game on demand. In the second game, the doubleheader, the Dragons remained dominant. Senior Shelby Misiak was 2 for 5 with a grand slam and 6 RBIs in the second game. The Dragons ultimately won that game 13-2. On Saturday, April 23rd, the Dragons held a home tournament at Lake Orion High School. The first opponent the Dragons faced was the Fenton Tigers early in the morning. Senior Sierra Gonzalez was the pitcher for Lake Orion and had a total of 6 strikeouts during the game. The Tigers were only able to get 6 hits, 4 of which were runs. Dragon sophomore McKenna Roy hit a home run and 2 RBIs during the third inning, earning the lead for Lake Orion. Teammate Susie Bilecki chipped in to the Dragons in the third after hitting a 3-run home run. Freshman Tessa Noose had 2 RBIs along with teammates Aaron Schrader and Sierra Gonzalez. The Dragons defeated the Tigers 13-4. Lake Orion's next opponent was Allen Park. The Dragons started off the game with a 2-0 deficit. Lake Orion's McKenna Roy hit her second home run of the day, earning 3 runs to take the lead. Freshman Tessa Noose had an RBI and Cassidy Carson pitched in 2 RBIs. Lake Orion won the game 7-2. For the third and final game, the Dragons played against Dakota for the championship trophy. Lake Orion started off strong when leadoff hitter Tessa Noose hit a triple followed by an RBI by junior Shelby Misiak. The lead continued to grow for the Dragons in the third inning of play. Aaron Schrader hit a single and Misiak was able to walk. Dragon Cassidy Carson was able to earn an RBI, and Peyton Shadiah, pitch runner for Misiak, scored a run on a pass. Sierra Gonzalez made sure Dakota only had 3 hits. Lake Orion won the championship title 3-1. The baseball team opened their season by traveling to Lakeview High School. The Dragons took an early lead, scoring 1 run in the first inning. They extended that lead to the top of the second, but Lakeview tied the game at 2 in the bottom of the inning. The Dragons regained the lead in the third and never looked back. They would score again in the 6th and 7th innings. Lake Orion won by 5-2. It was a doubleheader match, so both teams would play each other again. This time around, the Dragons would run away with the game. In the first inning, the Dragons scored 3 runs against Lakeview's 1, and the Dragons would score in all but 2 innings, most notably in the 7th. The Dragons put the game away by scoring 11 runs, holding off Lakeview to win the game 20-5. On Tuesday, April 12th, the boys traveled to Orchard Lake St. Mary's for a non-league matchup. Lake Orion scored 4 runs in the first inning and ran away with the game. Pitching for the Dragons was Cam Miller, who has signed to play for Central Michigan University. He pitched 4 scoreless innings to help the Dragons to a win. The final score, Lake Orion 6, Orchard Lake St. Mary 1. On Wednesday, April 13th, the boys traveled to Farmington High School for an OAA crossover game. The Dragons continued their success, beating Farmington 2-1. On Saturday, April 16th, the boys hosted Macomb, Dakota in a doubleheader. In the first game, it was close, but Macomb, Dakota prevailed by scoring 4 runs to Lake Orion's 3. The second game was just as tough for the Dragons. This time, both teams scored more runs, but the result was the same, Macomb, Dakota winning 11-5 over the Dragons. On Monday the 18th, the boys hosted the Highlanders of Rochester Adams at Lake Orion High School. The Highlanders proved to be too much for the Dragons, winning 9-3 in that game. On Wednesday, Lake Orion would have a rematch against the Highlanders. It was a much closer game than their previous matchup. Going into the 10th inning, the game was scoreless with only 10 combined hits between the two teams. But it only took one, and it came from Carl Britz of Rochester Adams. He hit a walk-off single that sent Michael Van Pelt home to score and win the game. The Dragon baseball team played 2 games on Saturday, April 23rd. Lake Orion started off their morning with the game against Heritage High School. The game was tight all the way through. Heritage took an early lead in the top of the first inning. They were able to stretch their lead to 4-0 against the Dragons. But in the bottom of the third, Lake Orion managed to pull out 3 runs with the help of Mike Falter and Bay Smart. Unfortunately, Orion was only able to get 1 more run, while Heritage got 2 more, and the final score was 6-4 in Heritage's favor. Later in the afternoon, Lake Orion played a game against Richmond High School. Though it was a low-scoring game, Lake Orion managed to take the win, scoring 1 run in the first inning and another run in the 4th. Richmond's Trevor Barrett was able to score a run for the team in the 6th, but the Dragons took the win with a final score of 2-1. The varsity boys lacrosse team has started out hot, winning their first 3 games of the season. The first game was against Plymouth. The Dragons won 9-5. Second game was away at Flint Powers Catholic High School, where they won handedly 15-1. And the third game was against Rochester High School, Lake Orion once again winning, this time 17-4. On Tuesday, April 12th, the boys stayed at home against Troy Athens High School. This game was in tune with their others. Solid defense led the Dragons over the Redhawks. The offensive players for the Dragons spread goals around with 8 different players scoring goals in that game. The Dragons were led by senior Daniel DiPolnino and sophomore Peyton Gashi with 2 each, and senior Jake Chappie with 3 goals and 2 assists. The final score was Lake Orion 12 and Troy Athens 2. They traveled again on Saturday, April 16th to Farmington High School. The Dragons jumped out to an early lead and ran away with the game. The final score, Lake Orion 17, Farmington 8. On Tuesday the 19th, the boys hosted Troy High School in Dragon Stadium. Troy would get out to an early 2-0 lead, but the Dragons would battle back. The Dragons went on a scoring run and led 8-4 with 1 minute left in the game. Troy created one last offensive opportunity and scored to make this final score 8-5 in favor of the Dragons. On Saturday, April 23rd, the Dragons continued their impressive winning streak against their rivals, the Clarkston Wolves. Dragon sophomore Chris French was the main goal scorer for Lake Orion, earning 4 goals throughout the game. The Wolves managed to sneak in 5 goals past Lake Orion's defense, but Lake Orion outshot Clarkston and took the win 7-5. Lake Orion has a current undefeated record of 8-0 and 4-0 in the OAA Red Division, and they sit in the #1 spot. The girls lacrosse team opened their season against Oxford on Monday, March 28th. Darcy Munns led the Dragons in scoring with 6 goals. Rachel Kleba added 3 to help lift the Dragons over the Wildcats, winning easily 17-2. Their second game of the season was on Wednesday, March 30th against Walled Lake Northern. Darcy Munns again scored 6 goals, while Gwyneth Broadbeck added 3 as the Dragons scorers won again against 15-6. On Wednesday, April 13th, the girls traveled to Regina High School for a non-OAA matchup. The Lady Dragons outscored Regina 11-5. Allie Lazara led the Dragons in scoring with 7 goals, while Darcy Munns added 4 of her own. On Friday, April 15th, the girls traveled to Rochester for an OAA white matchup. Allie Lazara and Darcy Munns each scored 5 goals to help lift the Dragons over Rochester. The final score was Orion 12, Rochester 3. On Monday, April 18th, the girls hosted Grosse Pointe North in a non-OAA matchup. The game was close throughout the night. The first half ended with Grosse Pointe up 11-10. The second half ended in a tie, all even at 17. The game would continue into overtime, where the Lady Dragons scored 3 more goals and held off Grosse Pointe, making the final score Lake Orion 20, Grosse Pointe 17. On Wednesday the 20th, the girls traveled to Clarkston. It was another close game for the Dragons, but they ultimately fell to the Wolves 12-9. Allie Lazara and Darcy Munns led the Dragons in scoring with 2 each. On Thursday, April 21st, Lake Orion hosted a game against Farmington High School. The Lady Dragons came to this game with the intention of scoring big. In the first half of play, the Dragons earned 9 goals. Farmington only got 2. And in the second half, Lake Orion continued to keep scoring goals, getting 8 more. Farmington was able to score 6. The Dragons took the game 17-8. The Lake Orion High School boys and girls track teams have been underway for the past 2 weeks, and both teams have performed well right out of the gate. Let's go to Ian Locke for the story.
Thanks, Kevin. The LOHS girls and boys track teams have been underway for the past 2 weeks, and both teams have performed well right out of the gate. On April 13th, Rochester Stony Creek rolled into Dragon Stadium for the first dual meet of the season. The LOHS relays did well right off the bat, tallying wins in the 4x800 to set the tone for the rest of the meet. Standout performances were put in by senior Andrew Laurent, winning the mile in 4:33.20. Sheldon Drake winning both the 100 and 2-meter dash, and Bobby Beggs winning the 3,200-meter run in 10:20.60. The Dragons won 13 total events and the meet, 95-33. The Lady Dragons also dominated, winning 11 events and the meet, 91-37. Standout performances were put in by Taylor Eaton, taking the shot put and discus events. Freshman Olivia Ames winning the mile in 5:35.70. Depth proved to be the downfall of Stony Creek as the Dragons roll. The Dragons represented their school well at the Brandon Invite on April 16th, with the boys team taking top honors with 112 points, with the Lady Dragons taking the runner-up trophy with 116 points, just 4 shy of the winner, Ann Arbor Skyline. At Oxford on April 20th, the Dragons boys and girls teams rolled to victory over the Wildcats 94-34 and 96-32. The boys won 12 events in dominating fashion. The Lady Dragons did even better with 16 total wins. The Oxford Invitational was next on the docket on April 23rd. This meet was a nice gauge for both Dragon squads, as perennial power Oak Park was on hand to flex their muscle against teams from the OAA, Macomb, and the KLAA. The boys had a strong showing, finishing 4th overall with 48 points, with Oak Park taking top honors with 94. The Lady Dragons put in some very fast times and competed to a second-place runner-up finish with 90 points, just 4 shy of the top team, Oak Park, who finished with 94. The middle school track season just got underway 2 short weeks ago, with the first meets taking place on Monday, April 25th. Walden hosted Scripps Middle School for the opening meet of the 2016 season. The future of LOHS track looks bright indeed. Spirited performances showcase some real talent to keep an eye on. Scripps' depth at the relays and the sprints proved to be the difference in this close contest. The Scripps boys tallied 73 points to Walden's 50 for the win. The girls were a little closer, with Scripps pulling away 67-57 for the win. The Walden throwers and distance runners turned in solid performances, while Scripps' middle distance, sprints, and relays were to prove too tough for Walden to overcome. ONTV will be bringing you more track results from the middle school and high school levels all season long, as the Dragons make their push for the state regional meet at Lake Orion High School on May 20th and the middle school county championships on June 2nd. For Sports Update, I'm Ian Locke.
The Lady Dragons soccer team opened their season in late March with a loss to Berkeley High School. It was a tough-fought game for Lake Orion. Berkeley scored on a free kick from 40 yards out that went high into the net. Lake Orion senior goaltender Lauren Ospitz had 5 saves on the night. The Dragons had 6 shots on goal. In their second game of the season, the girls bounced back against Farmington. The first half went scoreless, and it was a back-and-forth battle. The Dragons struck first with a goal from junior forward Paige Goodman. The Falcons tied the game later in the second half, but the Dragons regained the lead at the 7-minute mark. Sophomore midfielder Megan Danielson had the game winner for the Dragons. Junior goalie for the Dragons, Taryn Red, had 10 saves on the night. On Thursday, April 14th, the girls traveled to Clarkson High School for an OAA white matchup. The first half ended scoreless. The Dragons capitalized in the second half with 20 minutes left in the game to take the lead. Freshman Grace Cady scored from 30 yards out. Only a few minutes later, the Wolves scored to tie up the game. As time wound down, both teams had scoring opportunities, but they weren't able to capitalize, and the game ended in a 1-1 tie. On Tuesday the 19th, the girls hosted the Auburn Hills Avondale Yellow Jackets at Dragon Field. It was a close-fought game, but ultimately the Yellow Jackets took the lead. They scored on a cross just past the halfway point in the second half, and it proved to be the only goal of the game as Avondale won by a score of 1-0. Thanks for watching today's episode of Lake Orion Sports Update. Keep watching our Sports Update for spring sports coverage. We'll see you next time.